Hello, and welcome to the English with Colin Podcast, a podcast for English language learners. My name's Colin, I'm an English teacher in Tokyo, and if you're looking to improve your English skills and gain more confidence in your ability to communicate in English, you've come to the right place. In these episodes, I'll provide you with short conversations in English that cover a range of topics, from everyday situations to more specialised subjects. These conversations are designed to help you practice your listening skills and pick up new vocabulary and grammar along the way. Regular listening practice is key to improving your English, and I hope this podcast will become a valuable resource for you on your language learning journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. And remember, the more you listen, the more you'll learn. This is episode 13, and in this episode we're talking about the pros and cons of living in a big city. Hey Sue.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well. So today we're going to talk about the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of living in a big city. Where have you lived? What big cities have you lived in?
Well, I'm from Mexico City, so that's a big city.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in Japan and in Tokyo,
Tokyo.
So that's another big city.
I have lived in Santiago, in Chile, in South America, and I lived in London, and I've lived in Tokyo. So, pros and cons of living in a big city. Where do you want to start?
I think the advantages of living in a big city is how close you are to culture, to museums, to concerts, to theatre, to all of these cultural aspects. Cities will have all of it, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think living in a big city, you forget the access you have. Because it's so much and maybe overwhelming, but it's just worth keeping an eye open for everything that's happening around you.
Right.
Culturally.
I certainly felt that more, I would say more in London. When I lived in London, culture was a bit more accessible to me just because it's an English-speaking city. And if I go to a museum or the theatre or whatever, it's in English and I can access it a bit more easily. So yeah, when it came to the weekend, it was always, for me, it was a case of, okay, which museum am I going to go to? What gallery am I going to go to? And the other great thing about museums and galleries in the UK, or specifically in London, is that they're free. So, you know, you've got the British Museum, or the National Portrait Gallery, or the Tate. They're all free. It can be quite expensive in Japan, in Tokyo, if you want to go to museums. And probably not something I would do every weekend. But when I was in London, every weekend I went to somewhere.
I would say one advantage that Tokyo has culturally is all the the matsuris, all the little festivals that, you know, throughout the year, especially summer.
Right.
And those, well, you can spend some money buying little things and food, but they're not that expensive. And I think it's a great way to get into the culture. Mexico also has festivals and festivities that people would go out to celebrate.
And they're quite open.
And they're quite
well.
open.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the museums and all of this, but there's also the more popular culture that is not expensive, and it really allows you to belong to a place.
Yeah.
Understanding what celebrations and why they do it, and be happy. Obon, although we've never really fully participated. It's one of my favorite festivities.
Yeah.
I love the dancing. I love the music. I love the idea.
Yeah. this last year we were in Fukuoka
We were.
during Obon, and they had a big festival near the station,
Yes.
near Hakata Station, and we enjoyed that for a while. And social life is a big positive as well.
Well, if there's a lot of there's a lot of restaurants, right, and places to go out and meet with friends, and then you don't need to go and spend a lot. You can go to the park, have a picnic. But there's so many spaces, open spaces, and private spaces that you can go and socialize.
You're always going to be able to find a group, your group, whatever you're interested in. Like if you're interested in photography, if you are interested in talking about politics, if you're interested in a specific sport or whatever, you'll find a club, a group, an organization somewhere where people share that interest. So that's definitely an advantage of being in a big city, is that you can find your people. If you're in a small town and you're interested in something that's a little bit unusual, you might not have anybody nearby who has the same interest.
You wouldn't be able to talk about it. That's true.
So yeah, this social life is definitely can definitely be easier. In a way, it can be harder sometimes. I think a lot of people living in Tokyo can be quite lonely.
Yes, but that's maybe a con, right? Disadvantage of living in the city is that you come to the city to work, right? Here, this is where the jobs are, and people work really hard, and sometimes they don't have time for social life. It's difficult to gather with friends because these friends would have different times, different hours. So I think at the end of the day, you go out with who you're working with, because they will have the same schedules.
Yeah, the relationships you have with your colleagues become really important.
Very important.
Because when they finish, maybe you finish at the same time, and you can go and you can get a beer after work. But your friend who works at a different company in a different side of the city, and your days off might be different, and you just might not be able to catch up with each other so easily.
That's another disadvantage, isn't it? Is transportation. Big cities are big.
Yes, by definition.
By definition, but what I mean is not only big in population; it's big in
distance.
So it takes time to go from one part of town to the another part of town.
Yeah,
and it can be expensive as well, right? So you cannot just be running around.
True.
It's expensive. It's tiring. It's crowded.
Well, if you think about Tokyo, I think if you've never been to Tokyo, it's very easy to think of it as one city, but really it is a city made up of cities. So, for example, if you go from, say, Edinburgh in Scotland to Glasgow in Scotland, those are two different cities with a lot of countryside in between. It's about 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes, Glasgow to Edinburgh on the train. That time traveling across Tokyo, you can't travel across Tokyo in that amount of time. So I might finish work in one part of Tokyo and I go to meet a friend in another part of Tokyo. It might take me that long just to transfer trains and walk here and there. So the actual size is really quite incredible. And if you come to Tokyo and you go up maybe the government buildings in Shinjuku or the Sky Tree, you can really see the distance.
Yes.
Like it's almost never ending. It's just buildings to the horizon, especially if you're there just as the sun's setting and you see the lights starting to come on. You can really see how far the city stretches out. I think noise can be a big con a big disadvantage as well. Noise and crowds.
Noise and crowds, yes, it's all the time, isn't it?
Yeah. And we notice it much more because we don't live so centrally anymore. So when we do go into the center of Tokyo, especially somewhere like Shibuya or somewhere like, I don't know, Roppongi or somewhere, we really feel the volume of people.
We do.
Much more strongly. I think it was Shibuya that we were in the last time we went to Shibuya. We really felt, maybe we're just getting old.
Maybe that's part of it.
Maybe we're just getting old. Last thing to talk about. Do you think Tokyo's a safe city?
Yes, I think Tokyo is a safe city. And that safety gives you a lot of freedom. And that's something that I really like about Tokyo, that I have my freedom because it's safe. I don't mean that nothing happens, but it's, in general, is very safe, right? So I can be out and about on my own, and I can be out at night, and it's going to be okay, which is not to say the same, for example, Mexico City. You will be fine most of the time, but you would kind of not be out on your own at night, right?
Yes.
Just to be on the safe side. But here, I don't need to think about that. And I really like that about Tokyo because it's given me a lot of freedom.
True. Yeah, the freedom, and also the transportation system is a big part of that. The trains and the buses, they will get you very close to where you need to go. So that's a big plus. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the English with Colin podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation and found it helpful in your language learning journey. Remember, the key to mastering a language is regular practice. So make sure you listen to our podcast regularly and keep honing your listening skills. We appreciate your support and feedback. So if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for future topics, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to joining you again next time for another conversation in English. Until then, keep practicing and take care.